So, let's Banzuke! Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. The Natsu 2025 Basho is over. Ono Sato is set to be the new Yokozuna. Hoshoryu came back and showed that he's actually kinda worthy of the Yokozuna rank, and everything else went to shit. As always, we're gonna begin with some math. Alright, per usual, we are starting at the top. Hoshoryu is Yokozuna. He will never go anywhere except maybe to 1 West someday. But that's not going to happen this time because Ono Sato is going to go there. In case you're relatively new to Sumo or you've never seen this type of promotion before, basically, if someone goes up to Yokozuna or Ozeki, they go to the back of the line regardless of how well they did in the previous tournament. Even if Hoshoryu had sat out completely, Ono Sato would go behind him. After this, now that they're both at the same rank, they will be ranked based on the order of wins that they get in the previous tournament. But for now, Hoshoryu, Yokozuna East, Ono Sato, Yokozuna West. Kotozakura, as the only current Ozeki, is going to slide over to Ozeki 1 East by default. Daisho was at Sekiwake 1 East and Kirishima was at Sekiwake 1 West. It is not impossible that Kirishima and Daisho flip-flop. I didn't look up what the odds of this are. This is something that for a long time, they would normally keep the guy at Sekiwake East in place unless there was a huge gap in wins, but they did something a little different recently. I don't remember the details. It's not that important. We can figure that out later for like the Guess the Banzuke video. What matters here is Wakatake Kage is going to end up at Sekiwake 2 West. I personally wondered just a little if Waka ended up with just 11 wins. See, normally if you get 11 wins as a Komasubi, they will open up a new Sekiwake slot for you to go up to because they want you in that position in case you go on an Ozeki run. Now, if he had 11 wins, because the Komasubi situation was potentially so screwed up, I wondered if maybe they would leave him at Komasubi with 11 wins just to make that a little bit cleaner, but that ended up not being necessary. He has 12. He will go up. He's going to be at Sekiwake 2 behind Daisho and Kirishima for the same reason Ono Sato is behind Hoshoryu. He's new to the rank. He's being promoted to the rank. He goes to the back of the line. Also, because this is where they balance the Banzuke only up top, you've got 1 East, 1 West, 2 East, 3 East, 2 West. So now Waka is going to go to the west side, leaving the east side blank so that there's 3 and 3. Now we get to talk about the interesting stuff, the drink-worthy stuff. And actually, it's not Komasubi. Komasubi got straightened out pretty nicely by Oshoma's win over Abi and Aonishiki's win over... Oh, did I screw it up again? Oh my god. Aonishiki's win over Sadano Umi. Basically, there's nobody who's even close to these two. Oshoma was way ahead of everybody else. He's going to go to Komasubi 1 East. Aonishiki, he is a full rank ahead of Onokatsu, a rank and a half ahead of Kinbozan, and the only one with a winning record who can go up. Yes, mathematically, he's tied with Wakamoto Haru. Losing records do not go up, so Aonishiki is going to go to Komasubi 1 West. This is pretty much locked in. The real next question is, what do we do with the guys at the top of Maegashira? See, right now you've got Onokatsu and Kinbozan who are in the vicinity, but Kinbozan's behind everybody. Onokatsu is behind Wakamoto Haru and Oho. He's tied with Takayasu and Abi. He's going to end up behind all 4 of those guys as well. So lock in Onokatsu at 3 East and Kinbozan at 3 West. The real question here is, where does Takayasu go? Now you might wonder, because if we put Oshoma back, so Oshoma was at 1 East mathematically, right? So he's ahead of everyone else, he should go there. But Aonishiki was here, and that puts Takayasu only 1 rank behind him. Maybe they're gonna take Takayasu and put him at Komasubi 1 West. It's a very small demotion, it's only a half a rank, but with the expansion of the Sanyaku, relatively speaking, it's a full rank. It could happen. It's something that they've done at Maegashira. Why couldn't they do it here? Well, they could, but they're not gonna. And let me explain the reason I'm so confident in that statement. I did a little research. First, I started with, did anybody who was Komasubi and get 6 wins stay at Komasubi? Now, that could include a drop from east to west, or from like Komasubi 1 to Komasubi 2 for some reason. They used to give those extra ranks out a lot more commonly in the past. And I did it for the entire 6 Basho era of Sumo. The Banzuke, the way it's been done, has changed dramatically over time. So for it to have never happened, for all the different ways that they've done the Banzuke, for no committee to have ever felt that this was appropriate, that suggests that seems kind of unlikely this time. But I went on and looked up more stuff. The next thing was, has anybody at Komasubi 1 West, which is generally the lowest Komasubi rank, with 7 wins, stayed at Komasubi? Remember, 7 and 8 is a record where guys will often stay in place if there's no one to take their spot. But in this case, 0 results. It's never happened, despite the fact that there have absolutely been situations where it would make sense for them to do so. And then finally, I looked up, has a Sekiwake with 6 wins ever stayed at Komasubi or Sekiwake? Has a Sekiwake with 6 wins ever only dropped to Komasubi? They have not. The only time where a Sekiwake with 6 wins stayed in the Sanyaku was in 2022. Daisho was 6, 7, and 2. He dropped a half a rank to Sekiwake 2 East, but that was a COVID basho. He dropped out of the tournament near the end because of a COVID infection in his stable. So that entire Banzuke situation was messed up by the fact that guys had to be limited in their movement if they had to drop out due to COVID reasons. So during normal Banzuke preparation, nobody at Sekiwake or Komasubi who has had 6 wins has ever, in whatever it is, 70-something years of doing this, has ever stayed in the Sanyaku. So for Takayasu to do this time, because trust me, I'm not going to get too far into it, but I looked, and there were some situations where it absolutely would have made sense to leave him there, but they didn't, and there's no reason to think it's going to happen this time either. So Takayasu stays in the Maegashira ranks, or goes to the Maegashira ranks. Aonishiki is going to end up at Komasubi. Now, where do we put Takayasu? Well, he's tied with Abi. He was in the Sanyaku, so he's almost certainly going to end up ahead of Abi. Like, that's almost a given. So Abi should be at the back of this line. We'll move him to 2 West. So does Takayasu go to 1 East, Wakamoto Haru to 1 West, and Oho to 2 East? Or do Wakamoto Haru and Oho stay ahead of him? The reason I put it like this is because even though all 3, Waka, Oho, and Abi, had 7 and 8 records, and so it would kind of make sense to just move them all together, that's not necessarily what they're going to do. In fact, I would wager that there's going to be some kind of an argument, does Takayasu go to the front of the line or the back of the line, and so they might come to one of those compromises where he goes somewhere in the middle. And this would be the middle that makes the most sense. He stays ahead of Abi, because by the math they're tied, leave him ahead. Could he go ahead of Oho and not Wakamoto Haru? Yes, but that just kind of looks weird. If you haven't done this for very long, it might be like, it's all the same to me. To me, this looks very strange. I think he's going to end up at 1 East, though. And the reason is relatively straightforward. If Takayasu goes from Komasubi 1 East to Maegashira 1 East, he drops 1 rank. Waka goes down a half rank, Oho goes down a half rank. It's a little more favorable to Takayasu, but you know what? He was in the Sanyaku. That's okay. If he goes behind any of these guys, so we'll just switch him with Waka to show this. Waka goes down nothing, which happens on 7 and 8, but then Takayasu goes down a rank and a half, which is arguably more favorable to Wakamoto Haru than to Takayasu. Briefly, the math says that if you have 1 fewer win, you should go down 2 more ranks. If we move Takayasu ahead of Oho, or behind Oho, I should say, then he goes down 2 ranks, Wakamoto Haru goes down none, Oho goes down none, and so this is equal, quote unquote. Like, Takayasu is going down the same amount relative to his record that Wakamoto Haru and Oho should go down relative to theirs. But because they have generally been quite nice to Sanyaku wrestlers compared to Maegashira ones, I think they're going to keep Takayasu ahead. It makes enough sense. All the 7 and 8 guys go down a half a rank, even though they don't necessarily use this as a reason for why they do things. This looks a little cleaner to me. It looks like it's more likely what they're going to do. This might not be correct, but it's more of the odds-on favorite. Now we get to Tamawashi and Hakuoho. Well, Hirota Umi is going to play into this as well. If we move Tamawashi ahead of Hakuoho, So because Tamawashi was in the Joy, these tied situations, the Joy guys have been getting that preference. Then cool, he goes to 4 East, he goes down 1 rank. That's not much on 6 and 9, but everybody at the top sucked complete ass, so there's not that many options here. If they do that, there's a pretty good chance that Hiraumi also goes back to 4 West, so he only goes down 1 rank. Hakuoho, the reason is not so they move together, the reason is because Hakuoho is already getting an over promotion. He's already going up 2 ranks in this situation on 8 and 7. That's better than he should expect with that record. They don't need to be nicer to him than that. That has been a relatively common thing they've done lately. Minimize the over promotion of winning records from the middle and bottom of Makuuchi, especially when guys from the Joy are there competing for spots. Now, I don't think that goes so far as for Takeru Fuji to get ahead of him as well, but, you know, +2, that's fine, and Takeru Fuji should stay ahead of Meisei. His really unfortunate 6 and 9 is gonna put him 1.5 down, and then Meisei goes up, he's +4 on 9 and 6. Tobizaru is in a position where he should stay in place. There's really not a good reason. We're gonna ignore Kusano for now. He's gonna be way, way lower than this. This was just a mathematical move. The Juryo guy's not gonna be anywhere near here. But Tobizaru is ahead of Endo. He was not in the Joy, but he certainly had a tougher schedule. There's no reason to put Endo ahead of him unless they're just mad at Toby for some reason, which could explain why they hit him a little bit harder than other guys coming into May. I don't know if they're gonna do it again though. So we'll move Endo up. He goes up +4 on 9 and 6. If we ignore Kusano, could Gonoyama move ahead of Sadanoumi? Maybe. I wouldn't expect it though. From a half rank behind, that could happen. From a full rank behind, I think it's less likely. Also, Gonoyama has just been such a disappointment that if you buy into the idea that the JSA will hit guys that they don't like or that they're upset with or whatever, he probably just dinks down to Maegashira 8. So, Sadanoumi, 7 West, we'll just get Kusano out of the way for the moment. Gonoyama, Ichiyamamoto. Tied wrestlers tend to go in order of wins further down because these guys were in the Joy, and because Ichiyamamoto did not get that full Sanyaku experience, I think Gonoyama stays ahead. But probably these guys are at Maegashira 8 in whichever order. Ura behind them slides up to Maegashira 9 East. He should actually have a competitive schedule next time. Let's look forward to that. Scrolling down, now we've got Atami Fuji. Yeah, Chiyoshoma at 5 West. Yeah, that's not really the Joy. He's not gonna get any kind of bonus from being that rank. So let's just start sliding them in order. Atami Fuji, he goes up. Roga and Takanosho were further down, so we're gonna go by wins. Roga to 10 East, Takanosho to 10 West. Toki Hayate will go to 11 East, and then we've got Chiyoshoma and Midori Fuji. If we stick with wins, Midori Fuji should go ahead of Chiyoshoma. Yeah, we're still not putting Kusano anywhere yet. We'll just move Wakaikari down too. Asakoryu slides in nicely at 12 West with his 10 and 5. That's an exact 5 rank promotion, so that's good for him. And now we can think about Kusano and Wakaikari. Now, in case you're wondering why Kusano isn't going to go higher than Maegashira 13, even though he had a 13 and 2 Yusho at Juryo 1, this is from November, the last time that somebody had a really good record at Juryo 1 and won the Yusho. Kinbozan was 12 and 3, and as you can see, he only moved up to Maegashira 14. Maegashira 13 has been essentially a soft cap for guys coming up from Juryo lately. I would not expect him to go any higher despite how well he's done, especially since there's no reason to move him higher. There are no gaps they need him to fill. So now the question is, do they move him ahead of Shodai? Nah, probably not. Even though, like, the math doesn't matter here. What matters is, where are they going to move the guys who are already in Makuuchi compared to the guys who are coming up from Juryo? In this case, Kusano to 13 East does make some sense. I mean, he was absolutely shredding, and this gives Shodai his regular demotion, but in the last couple Banzukes, they've actually been very nice to the guys who were demoted within Makuuchi compared to the Juryo guys. So, as an initial guess, this is going to take a little bit of thought, but as an initial guess, I'm going to say Shodai to 13 East. Then, that one's tough. Because if they do that, they should put Churinaumi to 13 West. In fact, that's probably the safer bet. Kusano to 14 East, Wakaikari to 14 West. That's the most likely thing that they do, given recent Banzukes. What does also make sense, though, is if they move Kusano to 13 West and Shura to 14 East, just because Kusano was so far ahead of Wakayakari that would put a little bit of space between them, and that might feel like it's a more correct relative promotion for those two guys. But for the moment, I'm going to leave Chura at 13 West, Kusano to 14 East. That's pretty cut and dry. Now, Kota Shoho and Kaio, they're tied and they're only slightly behind Hide no Umi. So Hide no Umi probably ends up behind those two. Or I should say, Hide no Umi would end up behind those two, except Kaio at 7 and 8 can't go above Maegashira's 16 East. So Kota Shoho probably ends up at 15 East. Hide no Umi most likely to 15 West, since there's a gap there. And then we bump up Mitakeumi and Kotoeho. Now there's one more spot to fill. The Sanyaku has expanded. When there were 7 Sanyaku, that meant there were 35 Maegashira, which meant 18 East was the bottom rank. Now there's going to be 8 Sanyaku, 2 Yokozuna, 1 Ozeki, 3 Sekiwake, 2 Komasubi, which means there's going to be 34 Maegashira, which means 17 West becomes a bottom rank. But that means we've got one more spot to fill. Well, the obvious choice is Shishi. He's a full rank ahead of everybody else. We just slide him up. That finishes the division. Now the question here is, does he end up ahead of Mitakeumi and or Kotoeho? It would probably be both or neither. But if we look at last Basho, Asakuryu was 6 and 9 at Maegashira's 16 East. So mathematically, he went down 1, 2 to Juryo 1 West. So he was mathematically Juryo 1 West. Tamashoho at 8 and 7, Juryo 1 East, was up 1 rank to 17 West. Tochi Taikai, 9 and 6 at Juryo 3 West, 1, 2, half, up to 18 East. So Tamashoho was a half rank ahead of Tochi Taikai. But as we can see, Tamashoho ended up at 17 East, Asakuryu went to 17 West, and Tochi Taikai went to 18 East. That was probably one of those arguments where they're like, he should go in front, he should go behind, he should go in front, he should go behind. Screw it, we want to get drunk, just put him in the middle and call it a day. This is one of those situations that even though it happened last time, and if we go directly by that outcome, we should look to put Mitakeumi, then Shishi, then Kotoeho, it's not something that you can take as, oh, well, they did it last time, so they're going to do it this time. They make these kind of marginal decisions differently constantly. So this is a crapshoot. Shishi could end up at 16 West, 17 East, or 17 West. I'm going to stick him at 17 West because to me that makes the most sense. If I have a reason to think the Banzuke committee is going to do something different, I might change this for Guess the Banzuke, but for now, this is most logical. This is what they probably should do. The fact that they might not doesn't matter. Okay, let's talk about Juryo. Tomokaze, Nishikigi, all right, the Makuuchi guys coming down should get some kind of priority. I'm guessing Ryuden will end up at 1 West, but he could be swapped with Tomokaze. Tomokaze will probably end up ahead of Shonen no Umi though. So Shonen no Umi to 2, Juryo 2 West. Osho Umi, hey, I thought he was going to do pretty good and he did. He's actually legit. When he first came into Juryo and struggled, it was like I knew he was hurt, but he still looked pretty terrible. Well, I guess it was more injury and less being bad, because ever since he actually regained his health, he's been pretty incredible. Tamashoho, Juryo 3 West, Shirokuma. Now, are they just going to put him at Juryo 4 East on 6 and 9? Are they only going to drop him that half rank? Maybe, but what they could do is throw Tochi Taikai there and... Now you've got Hakuyozan. Now, if you do this in order, Hakuyozan, wow, I just messed that up. Hakuyozan is going to end up at Juryo 4 East with no demotion. That's not going to happen. So let's do this in win order. Honestly, I've paid slightly less attention to Juryo. I don't know if they're as committed to the win order thing as in Makuuchi, but let's just go that way. Tohakuryu goes up 6 on 9 and 6. Hakuyozan then only loses a half a rank because Hitoshi at Juryo 6 with 7 and 8, he cannot go above that spot. We've got Tohakuryu, we've got Hakuyozan. What they could do though is slide Hakuyozan back because Tochi Taikai is coming down from Makuuchi. They could put him ahead so that Hakuyozan gets a little bit better of a demotion. Then Shirokuma, he goes down 2. Kageyaki, he's going to go down 2. Daiseisan's going to drop by a half. Do they put Kazekano ahead of Takarafuji? Well, Takarafuji was at the top of the division, and that's like called the Juryo Joy, so to speak. So maybe they put him ahead of Kazekano. That's kind of a coin flip. We just slide Fuji Seiyun up. Otsuji, kind of like Kusano above, he's not going to end up this high. Forget the math. Let's take a look at the rest of the division. Nishiki Fuji, Tsurugisho, Mitoryu. We'll slide Otsuji down. Let's assume Shiden ends up behind Nabatame because he still gets a little bit under-demoted. Shimanoumi, 5 and 10. He's just going to drop 3.5. That's actually not the worst under-demotion he's ever had with a record like that, but hey, things are friendly for him yet again. Hatsuyama, Daiamami, obviously Mita, he was lucky to get his 8th win before he broke his hand, so we're going to put him up. Hatsuyama, Daiamami cannot go past 13 West. So now we've got to fill it out with Makushita guys. Otsuji obviously is going to be the top one of them, Juryo 13. Could he end up ahead of some of these Juryo guys? I don't think he's going to end up ahead of Mita, because Mita had a winning record in the division. Maybe they slide him ahead of Hatsuyama, but I don't think they will. Hatsuyama's still getting a 2-ranked demotion on 6 and 9. It's not like they're going to feel like they need to move him down because he's not getting demoted enough. So Otsuji, he comes up, Juryo 13 East, and then Hyokukayu and Kotokuzan both won what we call exchange matches near the end of the tournament, which is to say they beat guys in Juryo who were at risk of demotion. Hyokukayu beat Mudoho on day 13 or 14, and Kotokuzan beat Miyanokaze on the last day. Scrolling down a little bit, we see Miyanokaze and Mudoho are both well into Makushita. Mathematically, they're just going to be back in the regular old black Mawashi next time. Hyokukayu, Kotokuzan, they're going to be in Juryo. And that is the instant Banzuke for Nagoya 2025. Obviously, there are still a few things to think about, but surprisingly, they are mostly towards the bottom of the division. There's always the questions of how guys coming down from the Joy are going to mix in with the guys coming up from further down the Banzuke, and the whole thing is likely to get a little messy, but it could have been worse, so let's be thankful it wasn't. After that, of course, the tier list recap is going to come out as soon as I can get it done, and then something fun. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be able to put it together, but hopefully I can, and if I can, it's going to be pretty cool. So look out for that stuff, have a great day, and I will see you soon.